Hey everybody, this is John from OurHomeFromScratch.com. This is a video on how to build shaker-style inset cabinet doors. So I'm making these doors to fit in a built-in. I'm working from an existing face frame that I've already constructed, and I'm going to start by making the stiles. So to get the stiles, I'm measuring the length of the opening, and I'm going to make them out of poplar. Now, I think the key to doing a quality job here is making sure the stiles are the exact same length. So what I'm going to do to get that is I'm going to clamp them together. Now here I've clamped them together with a couple shims so I don't mar the wood, and I'm going to square off one end on my miter saw. Okay, so now from that squared end, I'm going to measure the length of the required length of the stiles. Okay, so now because I've cut them at the same time, both boards are the exact same length. The other way to do this is measure one and cut it, then measure another one and cut it. I think this is the best way to do that. So, now that I've got them cut to the appropriate length, I take them over to the face frame and I'm going to fit them in. I'm going to use some shims I bought. These are these hinges. These are the hinges I'm going to be using when I actually install it. I'm going to put them on both sides just for the fit up. So these hinges, when you install the door, will create a little gap. I want that gap to be the same all the way around the door. That way it looks even. I think it'll look more professional rather than having a varying gap or one side bigger than the other. This is how you get that result. Okay, next I'm going to transfer the edge of the stile where it hits the face frame. Okay, and I'll show you why I'm going to do that in a few minutes. Next, I'm going to actually measure in from that first mark 3/4 of an inch into the stile. Okay, now the reason for that is the rail boards are longer. All right, this is the tongue and groove construction technique here. So the rails are actually going to be longer than the opening, and I want them 3/4 of an inch longer on each side because the tongue that goes into the stiles is going to be 3/4 of an inch long. So that's how I'm kind of figuring out the length of these rails. Is I'm going to basically measure from one 3/4 inch mark to the next one from stile to stile, and that's my rail boards. So I've cut my rail boards out using the exact same methods I did with the stiles, and I'm going to make sure that they are the appropriate length by putting them on those marks, making sure they're not too long or too short. Then I'm going to transfer that first mark onto these boards. So that first mark is where the stile should hit these rails. And it should be about 3/4 of an inch in from the end. You could also just measure it in 3/4 of an inch, but I thought this would be just the best way to field fit this. So the tongue should be 3/4 of an inch long, and that's how I know it'll intersect the stiles appropriately. Now I'm ready to take this to the table saw. First thing I'm going to do is make the groove. So all 4 boards will have a groove all the way around, and that will be for the center panel. Because this is a shaker style door, there will be a center panel. I'm using a dado blade here. It's 2 stacked blades. The blade is set 3/4 of an inch high to correspond to how far our tongue will go into it. And I want this groove to be in the center of the board. So what I did is I set it to basically where the center is. And there's a way to guarantee that it's in the center. So I'm going to pass it through once on the table saw, and then I'm going to turn the board around after it goes through once, and I'm going to run it through again. That pretty much guarantees this groove is in the dead center of that board. The first time it gets run through, there's a lot of resistance. The second time, it basically flies right through. So I'm doing this first on a scrap board. I don't want to do this on the actual production piece because if I make a mistake, then I have to start over. But a scrap board, that's the best way to make sure the groove fits perfectly, or the groove is the appropriate location. So now it's time for the tongues on those 2 rail boards. Also, again, using the dado blade, I've set the fence so it doesn't cut into it any longer than 3/4 of an inch. And I set the blade height to 1/4 inch. I'm going to basically chip away. On the scrap board, I did it on 4 sides, but on the actual production pieces, I only need to do it on 3. The 2 edge pieces, one of the edge pieces actually on each of these boards won't have the tongue removed. Because we want it to be flush. You'll see what that looks like. But for this scrap board, I accidentally did it on all 4 sides. So again, scrap board here. Make sure I get the tongue the right size. Make sure I get this process right, and then I'm going to take it off the table saw, and I will make sure that tongue fits into the groove I just made. Now this, you can tell this actually the scrap board doesn't even have a groove in it yet because it's a scrap board. So let's see how it fits into the groove. All right, nice and snug. Looks good. So I can actually make those tongues on the actual production pieces, and I will be good to go. All right, so now with the grooves and the tongues have been machined, I can dry fit this to make sure it fits nicely. Now those are the tongues. You can see it only has it on 3 sides there, so the bottom of those doors and the top of the doors actually are nice and flush. So I'm going to put this together just loosely here, and then I'm going to fit it back into the frame opening. And this is to make sure that it fits well, basically. I want to make sure that gap I planned on, that hinge thickness, is the same top, bottom, left, right, and it looks nice and quality in there. So I'm going to make sure this is all flushed up, because this is a professional fit up here. We want to make sure this is, this is it, because if I don't get this right, I'm going to be gluing it up next. So looks good, making sure everything's flushed, not too hard, right? So this is what makes it an inset door. It's inside the face frame here. All right, now we're ready for the glue up. I'm using regular wood glue, and I'm only going to apply the wood glue on the tongues of the rails. That's it. The groove, all the grooves and the stiles, none of that gets glue. The reason is that center panel, well, here I'm using plywood, so it's pretty dimensionally stable over time, but I don't want that thing to shrink and contract or expand with the changing seasons, so I don't want to put glue in those grooves. I just want just the tongues will be fine. So I'm using a little crappy paintbrush, brushing on some wood glue, sliding in my center panel. Now, for the center panel, you could use 1/4-inch plywood. I tried that doing it the first time, and it was really flimsy. So the second time around here, this is what I'm doing. I'm using a 1/2-inch plywood. 1/2-inch plywood with a rabbet all the way around it. So I've basically taken off half the material right along the edge so it fits into the groove, using also a dado blade. So it's, but again, regular 1/2-inch birch plywood. Simple thing. So yeah, this is it. So I'm making sure I get this nice and put together here. You can see I've got some scrape marks already on the center panel. That's just from removing it and putting it together, making sure it fits well. I mean, you have to do this dry fit before you get to the glue up a couple times to make sure it's nice and snug. You may have to remove some material from the center panel. It's trial and error. But I'm ready to go, so that's why we're gluing it up here. So you can get a closer look at that rail there with the glue on it. Again, my dollar store paintbrush to butter up those tongues. So this is the basic process for a shaker style door. Now I'm making this inset because it fits inside the face frame. If you wanted to make it a regular overlay door, it would just be bigger than the face frame opening by so many, 3/4 of an inch all the way around or whatever. But that's it. That's the only difference between an inset and an overlay, is how it fits into the face frame. But the shaker style door is the same. So that's pretty much the differences there. So once this gets glued up here, I'm going to make sure all the edges are shimmed up, or squared up and flush before the glue sets. You only get really one shot at this. If it doesn't work, I have to build another one. So making sure I get any glue that comes out wiped off. This is a paint grade project, so again, you can tell I'm using poplar boards for the stiles and rails, birch for the center section, because hey, it's painted. You don't really tell the difference. You could use pine for this. I wouldn't. Poplar works best, I think, or maple. If you're using paint, if it's a stain grade project, you can use cherry. You can use oak, but that center panel then would have to also be that same species of plywood. So squaring this up here, banging it on the table. Pretty straightforward at this point. I'm using rubber mallet here to do that. I wouldn't use an actual hammer. You could, and I'm going to be using a shim here for that too. So, all right, now pull the clamps out. Now these are, I think, case-style clamps. These are maybe 25, 30 bucks a piece. These are 24-inch longs. They come varying lengths. Very crucial for putting together doors. You need either this or some type of bar clamp if you want to get this done right. So these will sit under there great. These are a really nice set of clamps. I really recommend clamps of this quality if you're going to be doing this type of work on a regular basis. So as I squeeze this together, some of the glue will pop out of the joint there. I'll wipe it up with a wet damp paper towel. It's not quite as critical, I think, with a paint grade project, but with a stain grade project, yeah, you really got to get on that glue and make sure it's cleaned up. And as I clamp this up, I'm checking to make sure these are flush, and I'm using a shim there. there's where my black marks came from, that kind of stuff. I'm making sure I'm flushing it up with a shim. You don't want to hit the wood directly with a mallet or a hammer. It tends to mar it, so don't do that like I'm doing there. Yep, giant hypocrite here. So I'm also wearing a Red Sox t-shirt. You need to do this in Boston apparel, apparently. Yankees, it's not going to work out for you. So as I push this out, you can see the glue squeezes out of those joints, clean it up, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to let this door bake overnight. I'm going to let the glue cure essentially, and then I'll be ready to fit it in the frame again, make sure it fits well, and then sand it and prime it and paint it. So that's really all there is to it. That's how you make a shaker style inset door. Make sure you come back to our website, ourhomefromscratch.com, to see how this project was concluded. This project actually got finished months ago. I'm actually re-editing the video. That's why it's up. So thanks for checking out our video, and we will see you later.